If you've been wondering which laptop should I buy for motion graphics or motion design, you're in the right place. This is the Motion Graphics Laptop Buyer's Guide. We have laptops in this list all the way from a budget-friendly standpoint up to the higher performing laptops and for which specific programs they will work well in and which specs you should pick. So this will be a full walkthrough. I have benchmark tests. We're looking at thermals. We're looking at spec outs. I mean, it's just everything. Let's get into it. So as we dive into this video, my thoughts on these laptops to kick us off and what to expect out of this video is you're going to see these laptops in ascending order from the most affordable up to the most expensive. We're going to have timestamps for each category, and I have hands-on experience with 80% of these laptops. So I also have dedicated reviews on my channel. If you want to see a dedicated review of one of these laptops after we finish this video, you can get all this information. You can actually go and watch a dedicated review to really refine your choice. Like, okay, what does it perform like in this setting, and this setting, and this setting, and all that jazz. So I have 80% of these laptops will have hands-on reviews. All right, next up is that you need to stay till the end because there's benchmark test results. We're going to talk about the thermal temps as well as discussion regarding the specs and which specs are good for each category. Now, as always, there's affiliate links in the description below, and those are simply there for you to check pricing and availability. And if you make a purchase, though, it will support my channel. I get a small commission, but at no extra cost to you. And that's what keeps this channel alive and the helpful content coming your way. So I always appreciate it when you guys use those links. It's support for the channel, and you guys are awesome. All right, so let's dive right into the laptop lineups. First and foremost, the categories of the lineup. So we're going to start with entry-level motion graphics. This is going to be for programs like Photoshop and Illustrator. These laptops are going to have anywhere from 8 to 16 gigs of RAM. It's going to have integrated graphics processing. So these aren't going to have dedicated GPUs like the NVIDIA or the AMD GPUs. These are going to be integrated graphics inside of the CPU. Next is the enthusiast level motion graphics. This is going to be programs like Photoshop, Illustrator, and After Effects. We want to see a minimum of 16 gigs of RAM in these laptops, and we're going to have dedicated graphics processing units. And lastly, the creative professional motion graphics category, programs like Photoshop, Illustrator, After Effects, and Cinema 4D. These laptops are going to have 32 gigs of RAM, and they will have dedicated GPUs. Kicking it off with the entry-level motion graphics category, first laptop in the list is the Acer Swift 3. Love this laptop, has a super long battery life. It doesn't have the best color accuracy, unfortunately, but it is a great laptop to get you kicked off for Photoshop and Illustrator motion graphics. So this is going to have the AMD Ryzen 7 4700U. It's going to have 8 gigs of RAM, and it's going to have the integrated Radeon 7 graphics. And the estimated price of this laptop is around $673, but occasionally I've seen it lower, I've seen it higher, so you'll have to check the link to find out the exact pricing of this laptop currently. This battery lasted me over 9 hours when I was working on a road trip a couple of weeks ago. And so I can definitely vouch for that 11 plus hour battery life that they're saying, because it lasted 9 hours and my road trip ended and I still had at least another 25% left. It was around 25% on that battery. All right, let's keep moving forward. Next up is the Lenovo V14. Again, this laptop comes with the AMD Ryzen 5 4500U, the Radeon 6 integrated graphics, 12 gigs of RAM. So if you're somebody who's looking for a little bit more RAM to get a little better performance in Photoshop, this is going to be your ticket. And then as you see, still that color gamut range is still struggling. And that's what you're going to find in these lower budget laptops is the way that they save money is giving you a less color accurate and bright screen. So as we move up into the more expensive laptops, you'll see these specs improve regarding the color accuracy. All right, next up is the Lenovo IdeaPad S340. This laptop comes with the Intel i7-1065G7 with the Iris Plus G7 graphics. This laptop is a solid processor. This will be really good for Photoshop and Illustrator. You got 8 gigs of RAM, which, if you want to get more performance, as always, you can snag the upgrade and upgrade that to 16. And then, of course, we have the color gamut range, still struggling, but slowly working its way up in the color accuracy. And this one's around $715. Again, prices may vary. Check the links below if you're curious. The MSI Modern 15 just had this laptop in the studio. I have a full review of it. If you're curious, you can head on over to my channel or check it out in the YouTube cards above once this video is finished, of course. Don't go anywhere just yet. We got a lot to cover. And so this laptop comes with the i5. Comes with the No, it is an i7. My goodness. The i7 10510U has a 2.0 gigahertz base clock, 4.3 turbo with 4 cores and 8 threads. It has a semi dedicated GPU. So this one doesn't have like a full like fan and cooling setup. It is the chip. It's the GeForce MX 330. So with this laptop, if you upgrade it to 16 gigs of RAM, you're going to get great performance. But I will say, unfortunately, I was unable to test this laptop with the MX330. So whatever you see on my test results over on my channel, they're going to be better with the model I'm recommending here. And this one comes with 99% sRGB and 60% Adobe RGB. So this is the laptop spec I recommend for the Modern 15. I reviewed the i5. That's why I was confused and thought it's the i5 that I linked here, but I recommend the i7 version. It's going to have better performance, better color accuracy. The i5 does not have this type of color accuracy, so this is the MSI Modern 15 I personally would recommend. Next is the Acer Spin 5. This laptop really blew my socks off. It had great performance in Photoshop. It had great performance in Illustrator. Comes with the i7 1065G7, base clock of 1.3, turbo of 3.91, the integrated Iris Plus graphics G7, and it has 16 gigs of RAM. It also has great color accuracy at 100% sRGB and 79% Adobe RGB. So great little laptop. I love the 3x2 display. Some people are mentioning like these flickering issues on the screen. I personally did not notice that whatsoever, but you know, that's just one of those things. Some people's eyes register things differently. Upgradable level motion graphics. So this is kind of a mid-tier that I created as I was building out my lineup. And so just note that this is a good setup. Excuse me. This is a good setup to be upgradable. So what you'll find is, you'll get this laptop at 8 gigs, but then you can upgrade it to 16 and it'll give you even better performance. So let's dive into these models. This is the Lenovo IdeaPad Gaming 3. So this comes with 8 gigs of RAM, but I would recommend upgrading it to 16, especially with your GTX 1650 graphics processing unit and the i5-10300H. As you see in these recommendations, I say you can use After Effects, but if you buy this laptop in order to use After Effects, you need 16 gigs of RAM to get the juice necessary to run that program. So as you see, these laptops come with 8, but I'm recommending an upgrade. Next up is the MSI GF75. This laptop comes with the i5-10300H with 4 cores and 8 threads, 2.5 base, 4.5 turbo, and the GTX 1650. Again, upgrade that RAM to 16 gigs, please. And it comes with a 17.3-inch Full HD display with an 89% sRGB and a 59% Adobe RGB. Now, if you're somebody who's considering this laptop, but you're like, I really don't want, a 17-inch screen, I'll just go and get the GF65 because I want a 15-inch screen. And, Ben says it's great color accuracy. Be warned, because a lot of times laptop manufacturers put different screens on different models, even if they're kind of in the same category. And even if they're the same model, if you check the SKUs, sometimes they'll have different screens. So be very careful when buying. Make sure you do your research. If you want a color accurate laptop, and that means a lot to you, do your due diligence, Google it, research it, take the time. Ask me, I might be able to answer that for you, but most of the time you can do your due diligence and find it on your own. So rock on. All right, so next up in this lineup is going to be the Acer Nitro 5. I have currently tested the Ryzen 5 4600H version, and I definitely recommend 16 gigs of RAM on this one. I had it with 8 gigs, and it lagged in performance in some of the programs that it should have performed very well in. So I think I'm going to upgrade that and maybe rerun some tests and see if we can get some better performance out of 16 gigs, but it shipped to me with 8 gigs of RAM. You can get it with the i5-10300H, but you're going to get better multitasking performance out of the Ryzen version. Ryzen, however you want to say it. It's up to you. All right, next up is the Lenovo Legion model. So there's a variation of models here that you can pick. You can get a Ryzen 5, you can get a Ryzen 7, or you can get an i7 version. Personally, I would lean towards the Ryzen 7 model. I have tested the Legion 5i, which is a Intel i7-10750. Great performance, but if you want to get better multitasking, then you can't go wrong with that AMD processor. And especially that everybody's so hyped on AMD right now. I mean, you just got to join the party, right? You just have to get AMD because everybody's saying AMD's the best. So why would I not get the best? Because AMD's the best. do your research. That's all I have to say. There's so much hype around AMD right now. I have Intel laptops, like they're good. They're still good. They're still actually great. So just be careful with the hype. Do your research. See what you need. If you're somebody who's not going to be doing a lot of multitasking, well, Intel makes some fantastic processors. Now, the one reason people are so hyped about Ryzen is because it is more affordable in some cases. So, for instance, when you are comparing like an i7-10750H versus a Ryzen 7 4800H, you might save $100 going with the Ryzen. So yes, there are some benefits, but don't get on the hype train unless you actually believe in the product. I believe in the product. I think it's a great product, but I think both are good. So that's my 2 cents there. All right, next is the HP Pavilion gaming laptop. We have 2 variants here. We have the i5, more of the base model, and for an extra $100, you can get the i7. But when you upgrade to the i7, they give you the Max-Q GPU. Why? I don't know, but they do. So know that this GPU will be more powerful, but this processor will be more powerful. So it's kind of what do you want? Do you want a little bit better GPU or do you want a little bit more processor? Now, I will say for somebody who's going to be working in Photoshop and Illustrator and doing After Effects, you can get away with this less powerful GPU. But as you move up to Cinema 4D, that GPU is really going to make a difference. So this is a really tough break here. And if it was switched, I would feel more confident about just saying, yeah, go with the i7 all the way. But you really have to think through your use case. All right, now we're up to the enthusiast level motion graphics. This is programs like Photoshop, Illustrator, After Effects, and these laptops come with 16 to 32 gigs of RAM and dedicated GPUs. First up on the list is one of the most impressive laptops I've seen in my studio as of late. This has an aluminum top cover. It has amazing cooling performance. It's got great specs, and it's not super heavy. It's about 5.5 pounds and just under 1 inch thick. So it's a great model. If you're looking for a cool Ryzen laptop, and cool I mean temperature, then the HP Omen is really a great buy. It comes with the Ryzen 7 4800H with 2.9 base and 4.2 turbo clock, 8 cores, 16 threads, GTX 1660 Ti, 16 gigs of RAM, and 97% sRGB and 71% Adobe RGB in the 144Hz screen variant. Now, one thing I will point out is if you upgrade this laptop to say like an RTX GPU, you're going to get even more performance for motion design. And if you want to do video editing or you're going to get into 3D modeling, whatever it might be, killer laptop, especially with that upgrade. But if this is your price point, if this is your budget, it's a great entry point, and you'll see in the benchmark test later what this laptop is capable of. All right, the Asus Zephyrus G14, another great laptop. This laptop gets a little hot for my preference. I was seeing stabilized temps of around 87 degrees Celsius in some intense workflow tasks like video editing, After Effects, 3D modeling. This laptop does get pretty toasty. It is an all aluminum laptop, so it's a great build. It's a smaller build. It's thin. It's light. So for the performance, I'm really digging this laptop. And for the build quality. You can get it in 2 variants. You can get it in the AMD Ryzen 7 4800H or the AMD Ryzen 9 4900HS. The AMD Ryzen 7 actually outperforms the Ryzen 9 in a few tasks, in a few benchmarks. But overall, I would lean towards this laptop because of this RTX 2060 Max-Q. This GTX 1650 is good, but it's not great. And especially for an extra, I think that's $400. That is a price hike. But if you can manage it, you get more RAM, you get a better GPU, and you get a medium more faster processor. It's about the same. You get a little bit more clock speed, barely. But really, I'm looking at the RAM and the GPU in my decision-making process here. Next up is the MSI Crater 15M. This laptop is a great setup for the price point, especially if you're an Intel fan. You're going to get the i7-10750H with 6 cores and 12 threads. You're going to get an RTX 2060 GPU, 32 gigs of RAM, 1 terabyte of SSD, and great color gamut range, all for around $1,700. So great buy from MSI. I'm a fan of MSI. I know a lot of people hate on them recently. I'm sorry, MSI, that you're getting so much, noise coming your way. I've had experience with the products that have been good, so I really can't complain about MSI personally. Now, I know there's been some situations that have popped up, but that's not affected me, so I would say I'm a fan of what they're doing here with the products, not what they're not the rumors that are circulating, but with the products. I'm really enjoying what they've done here. All right, next is the Gigabyte Aero 15. This is one of my favorite gaming laptops for creative professionals. It is a laptop that got my best of show at CES just because it had so many great features packed into it. It had great color accuracy, it has a fantastic GPU, it has a great processor, and it's all under $1,700. Well, $1 under $1,700, all at $1,700. So this laptop is really impressive to me. I have a full dedicated review of it as well. So if you want to check that out, you can check it out on my channel, or I might link it up in the YouTube cards above. Next is the Acer Predator Helios 300, the best-selling laptop on my channel, all aluminum chassis. It's really, really phenomenal setup. It's about the same price as the Gigabyte Aero 15, has the same processor, has the same GPU, has 32 gigs of RAM, and has slightly lower color accuracy. But for somebody who's interested in gaming and really likes the Acer Predator Helios look, it's a great buy. But between the Predator Helios and the Gigabyte Aero, I would personally lean towards the Gigabyte Aero, just because of the color accuracy, and I just liked the feel of it in my hands. The keyboard was really nice. It was really smooth. It was a little bit lighter than the Acer Predator Helios, and it had that less of that gamer aesthetic. So for me as a creative professional, it was a little bit more of a classy setup than the big, bold Predator face on the front of the Helios. Next up is the Dell XPS 15 9500. This laptop is really, really solid for the fact that it is a aluminum carbon fiber laptop. It's got great color accuracy, has a 4K display, comes with a GTX 1650 Ti and the latest i7-10750H processor. Now, this laptop, for its price point, isn't going to be as well performing as something like the Acer Predator Helios or the Gigabyte Aero, but it is a thin and light laptop that is an on-the-go creator's dream. But know that for the price, you're not going to get the performance of maybe a more gamer-oriented laptop, just because they're putting focus more on the screen, they're putting focus on the build materials used, how thin and light it is, so on and so forth. Next up is the Razer Blade 15. Now, this laptop is kind of the MacBook Pro doppelganger? I don't know how to say that word, but you know what I mean, like the knockoff twin. So it has the i7-10750H with 2.3 on the base clock, 5.1 on the turbo, 8 cores, 16 threads, about a $3,000 laptop estimated right now. You can check the live price in the description below. It has the RTX 2080 Super Max Q, 16 gigs of RAM, and 1 terabyte of SSD. And it has a solid color accuracy of 100% sRGB and 72% Adobe RGB. So great laptop, slightly expensive. I mean, it's as or more than the MacBook Pro, depending on the spec out that you do. But if you're a Windows fan, it is a solid choice. The enthusiast level motion graphics. This is programs like Photoshop, Illustrator, After Effects, Cinema 4D, and it has anywhere from 32 to 64 gigs of RAM and a dedicated GPU. First up on the list is the Asus ROG Strix G17. This laptop comes with the i7-10750H with 6 cores and 12 threads, a massive RTX 2070 GPU with 8 gigs of GDDR6 VRAM, 32 gigs of RAM, but I personally reviewed the model that was 64 gigs, which was a beast, 17-inch screen with fantastic color accuracy. As I mentioned again, if you like this model, you're like, oh, I'll get the G15 because I don't want a 17-inch screen. Check the color accuracy. These are the models that really trip people up, and they buy the 15 thinking they're going to get great color accuracy, but they didn't get the right screen variant, so just be careful on this. That's my warning to you. But this laptop performed extremely well in a variety of the tests that we were running here. Next up is the Asus ProArt StudioBook Pro 17. This laptop was built with creative professionals in mind. So it comes with the Quadro RTX 3000, which is more of a studio-based workstation GPU rather than a GeForce gaming-based GPU. So this comes with the i7-9750H, has 100% sRGB, 89% Adobe RGB, and 100% DCI-P3 color accuracy, and it comes in a 17.3-inch Full HD display with 64 gigs of RAM. So it's a great setup. Has the specs that you need, and it comes in around $2,400. Next up is the Acer Concept D7 Pro. Again, we have the Quadro RTX 3000, 32 gigs of RAM, 1 terabyte of SSD, 4K screen, 100% sRGB, Adobe RGB, and DCI-P3 across the board, Pantone validated, and has the i7-9750H. Love this laptop for its all aluminum design. It's got the aluminum top cover, aluminum keyboard deck, aluminum side panels, and almost positive it's the aluminum bottom cover as well. The Asus ZenBook Pro Duo. I love this laptop because it's just a niche, unique aesthetic. So it's got a really cool use case where you got the dual screen, you got a screen along the bottom and your main screen. And this just gives you more space for designing and working with motion graphics. So you can keep a lot of your tools and panels down here, and then you can have your design taking place up here, which just creates more room, and it's a great on-the-go laptop. In terms of the RTX 2060, the i9 109880HK, it has 32 gigs of RAM and a 4K touchscreen display. It has an 81% sRGB and 62% Adobe RGB. Next up is the MSI GE75 Raider. This is quite a beast of a laptop, and for the price point, I'm pretty blown away at this price point. So it comes with the i9 10980HK, comes with the RTX 2080 Supermax Q, which is the 8 gigs of GDDR6 VRAM, 64 gigs of RAM, 1 terabyte of SSD, solid color gamut range, and that was the 2019 model. I'm not positive about the 2020 model, but that's all the information I could find on the color accuracy of this laptop. But man, for just around $3,000, this thing is a beast. That's all I gotta say. Next up is the Gigabyte Aero 15 Performance Edition. This comes with the i9 10980HK, the 5.1 gigahertz on the turbo clock and 2.3 on the base with 8 cores and 16 threads. RTX 2080 Supermax Q, 32 gigs of RAM, 4K screen, 100% sRGB, 100% Adobe RGB, Pantone validated, and all for around $3,500. The MacBook Pro, and this is going to be the souped up upgraded edition. We're going to have the i9 processor, 5500M with 8 gigs of VRAM, 32 gigs of standard RAM, and you're going to have a color gamut range of 100% sRGB and 100% Adobe RGB. So if I was going to get the MacBook Pro, I would not get the base model for motion design if I'm going to be doing After Effects or Cinema 4D. If you're just going to be doing Photoshop and Illustrator, you can get the base model, and that would probably be totally fine, and it'll save you around $1,000. But if you're going to be doing anything above Photoshop, I would lean towards the upgraded version. Razer Blade 15 Studio Edition. Now this is quite a powerful laptop with the i7-10750H, the NVIDIA Quadro RTX 5000. So that is an even beefier version of the GPU found in the Acer Concept E7 and the Asus ProArt StudioBook 17. And has 32 gigs of RAM, 4K touchscreen display with 94% sRGB and 60% Adobe RGB. Quite an expensive laptop, but it is a well-built MacBook Pro doppelganger, if that's how you say it, in Windows Edition. So great work from Razer, in my opinion, with the build quality. I got my hands on that at CES, and I was quite impressed by the build as well as the performance. I ran some they were doing some 3D modeling tests, as well as they were shooting they were editing 8K red footage, and it was just really smooth timeline. So an impressive laptop. All right, so questions we're going to be answering now. We're going to take a look at the benchmark tests, the thermals, and discussion regarding the specs. So let's get right into it. First and foremost, you can see the Puget laptop test. So this is a Puget Systems benchmark. So basically it runs a computer through a variety of tasks in Photoshop, and then it punches out a score. So as you see, a lot of the laptops with dedicated GPUs are getting high scores, but here's some of the lower GPUs. Here's some of the lower scores come from the Photoshop Illustrator category, that beginner enthusiast category, the entry level. Wow, my words are mixed up in talking about this. So the entry level category is going to have things like the Acer Spin, the Swift 3, the IdeaPad Flex 5. So these is going to be like the Ryzen 7. This is the i7-1065G7. This is the Ryzen 5 4500U. And so you see they're still scoring around 500, 400, and the top is about 800. So just thinking about this is a much more affordable laptop than this laptop up here. We're talking a $3,000 laptop here and a $600 laptop here. So price to performance, these are still doing great, but I would stick these laptops in Photoshop and Illustrator alone. Well, these are the laptops where we're going to be using After Effects, Cinema 4D, etc. So there's the benchmark scores for you for what they are. Next up is the After Effects benchmark. As you see, the Spin 5 was able to hang on in After Effects. After Effects is something that craves 16 gigs of RAM, especially for the benchmark tests that I run. If you don't have 16 available, it literally like cries at you and doesn't even run the benchmark test. So above all, we see that the Asus TUF A15, and this is the Ryzen 7 4800H, has one of the top scores, followed closely by the Acer Concept D7, the ROG Strix G17, which I said earlier is one of the most impressive laptops for the price point. Price, specs, and color accuracy, it's got a great lineup there. The HP Omen and the G14 follow closely behind that, and then it trails down the line. So great benchmarks out of After Effects for these upper laptops, especially this one. I'm telling you guys, it's a great laptop. Okay, next up on the list here, we have the After Effects render benchmark. So this is going to be GPU oriented, and so that's why you'll see the ROG G17 up top here, followed by the Asus TUF A15, the Asus Zephyrus G14, Predator Helios, StudioBook, and then we trickle down from there. Cinebench R20. So this is what I was talking about with the Cinema 4D. This is the benchmark test that ranks these laptops according to that program. You have the HP Omen with the Ryzen 7 4800H, really topping off the charts here, followed closely behind the G14. Like I said, processor-wise, the Ryzen 7 4800H, because it has a higher TDP, that means like the thermal limit, or thermal design power. It has a higher thermal design power wattage, and so that allows you to get some higher scores in certain programs because the Ryzen 7 has the Ryzen 9 4900HS pulls down that TDP, which makes the processor, performance-wise run a little bit slower in certain tests. And then you see we have TUF A15. Then you get into the i9, i7, Ryzen 5 4600H, and then we move on down the line from there. Thermals. Now this is an area that I told you. This Asus G14 runs pretty toasty. So it's around 87 degrees Celsius, and these are the stabilized temperatures. So after the programs have been, the program starts, the temperatures spike, and then they, kind of stabilize. So these are the stabilized temperatures. So we have 87 degrees Celsius, and then we work our way down. And as you see, the G17 sits at a nice middle of the pack at around 80 degrees Celsius stabilized. It's a solid temperature. But then the StudioBook 17, like I was saying, this laptop is a great all around, and it was built for creators. It's quiet and it's cool. So let's talk about this real quick. The StudioBook 17 sat at around, let me pull these up real quick so we can see them. The StudioBook 17 sat at around 40 to 50 decibels during the tasks it was going through. Whereas something like the G14 was around 55 to 60 decibels or higher. The Asus TUF A15, same thing. And then the Asus ZenBook Pro Duo was another laptop that was loud. So if you're looking for a laptop that's quiet, ProArt StudioBook's great. HP Omen's great, runs cool and quiet. The Strix G17 gets a little louder, and then, as we move up the list to the warmer laptops, they start to get a little bit louder. Now, the MSI Prestige 15, one of the quietest laptops, but I personally would not give my top recommendation for motion graphics, as it just doesn't have the best overall package for that use case. It's a great video editing laptop. It's a great laptop in Photoshop and Illustrator, but it's a little expensive to only be using this laptop for like Photoshop or Illustrator. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about is each of these specs. So first and foremost, not all CPUs are created equally. All right, now something I want to talk about is the specs. Now, not all CPUs are created equally. So if you have a Ryzen 5 4500U, that is very different from a Ryzen 5 4600H. So you're going to have a high performance processor with a higher TDP, higher clock speeds. It's going to be built to perform faster. And so when you're comparing them, a lot of times I see people who message me like, hey, Ben, I found this laptop. It's like $800. It has a Ryzen 7 processor. Is it going to be great for 4K video editing? So I click on the laptop listing, and it's a Ryzen 7 4700U. And I'm like, no, like it's going to work, but You're going to have a ton of drop frames. It's going to take forever to export. Not forever. It's going to take a while to export. And so you need to be looking towards a Ryzen 5 4600H or a Ryzen 7 4800H. But then that's going to, pull up your price point by about $300 to $600. So you really have to be thoughtful when picking a CPU because not all CPUs are created equally. Just like saying I found an i7 8550U. Is that going to be good for video editing? No. But an i5 9300H would be good for video editing. So you just have to really start to understand the processors, watch some reviews, watch my reviews, watch other reviews, and then also going through this best of list is really good because it gives you a full perspective on what these laptops are capable of. GPUs. Why is a GPU important? Well, because the GPU is what the computer uses to process graphics. So when you're doing motion graphics, when you are, designing things in After Effects, the GPU is being called upon to do all the things that are projected onto your screen, to make all those calculations and render out the things onto your screen. So GPU is very important. Inside of Photoshop, it's not as important because it's not doing these live graphical productions onto your screen, to say, to make it an easy word. Whereas with Photoshop, it's all still images. So Illustrator, Photoshop, you don't need those dedicated GPUs as much because it's not relying on them as much. RAM's up next. So 16 gigs is my personal minimum for things like After Effects and definitely Cinema 4D, but even Photoshop. I think 16 gigs of RAM will give you better performance in Photoshop. And so personally, if you can, buy a budget-friendly laptop with 8 gigs and then upgrade it with another 8 gig stick whenever you can. That's my recommendation. And then solid state drive versus hard disk drive. Solid state is going to have no moving parts, whereas the hard disk drive is going to have a little disk that spins, then it has an eye that reads it. Personally, for reliability's sake, I go with solid state, and they usually, most always, nowadays, have better performance than their HDD counterparts. So that is the thoughts regarding spec choices. Now, I'm going to give you a quick run through of my favorite laptops personally off this entire list. So you say, hey, Ben, what would you pick? If you got all these laptops, which one would you pick? Well, first and foremost, if I'm on a mid-size budget, I'm going to take the HP Omen 15. It's got great cooling performance. It's got aluminum top cover. Has a 1660 Ti. It has the Ryzen 7 4800H. It's a great build. Runs cool and quiet. Next is the Asus Zephyrus G14. This is going to be a thin and light laptop. It's going to run a little bit warmer, but it has the performance I need for motion graphics, and I just like the build. I really enjoyed this when I was reviewing it in my studio, and so Gotta add this to my list. Next is the Asus ROG Strix G17. So this laptop is a amazing price to performance laptop. So like I said earlier, you're gonna have 8 gigs of VRAM. You're gonna have the latest i7 processor. You're gonna have 32 or 64 gigs of RAM. Now, if you get 64, it's gonna pull the price up a little bit on you. And then you have great color accuracy. You really can't go wrong with this laptop, especially with a 17-inch screen, which gives you more room for designing. The Asus ProArt Studio Book Pro 17. This laptop is great. It's going to perform almost as good. The only reason I'm going to say it's going to have a little less performance is because it has last generation's processor from Intel, whereas the ROG Strix G17 has the latest 10th gen. So you're going to get a little bit more performance. You can get like 10 to 20% better performance out of the 10th gen over the 9th gen. But still a great laptop, great build quality, a little bit thinner and lighter than the G17, but a lot of similarities between these two laptops. The GE75 Raider, if you're somebody who wants an i9 processor, 64 gigs of RAM, I think it was 2 terabytes of SSD, color accuracy is solid. Man, you can't beat that laptop for just around $3,000. It's a steal, in my opinion, for the specs. It's not a steal as far as I only have $600 in my budget. No, of course it's not a steal. But for the specs, it is amazing. All right, remember that the affiliate links are in the description below if you're curious about the exact pricing of any of these models, or you're ready to make a purchase. And remember, I do get a small commission, but at no extra cost to you, and that's what keeps this channel alive and the helpful content coming your way. Of course, if you're curious about the exact full in-depth reviews of the models that I have reviewed here on my channel, head on over to my channel. You can check those out, or they'll be linked up in the YouTube cards above. Keep designing, keep creating, keep editing. I'm Benji Kaiser, and I'll see you here in the next video.